So let's talk about the opportunities in corporates then. So I've got a number of people that I know that are sort of trying to get their foot in the door with regards to, let's call them large clients, which would obviously transform their business. So without giving away everything you do, what would you say that, let's talk about the mistakes people make, I suppose.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is their messaging is aimed at the people that are going to benefit from their coaching. Right. So for example, when I was delivering menopause awareness stuff, really the end user were the women who were experiencing menopause who would get the support.
Yeah.
But that's not the message that I was giving through my marketing. The marketing was really focused on the benefit to the business or the organisation. The fact that, so many women were leaving the workplace, they were losing talent, they had high absenteeism because, people weren't feeling supported, high levels of stress and poor performance. That was often, it was a consequence of what they were going through with menopause. But actually, in my marketing, I had to be talking to the business and their needs as opposed to the solution, which was to raise awareness about something that was affecting their people. So I also did things like manager training to help them to be more aware. But again, I wasn't necessarily marketing to the managers. I have, when I think about my marketing and when I teach how to market, I talk about the decision makers, the influencers, and the interested parties. Mm-hmm. And I think you can market to all three, but the messaging is different. And I think it's the decision makers that business need that people often miss. So perhaps they're talking about mindfulness in the workplace, so they'll talk a lot about the benefits of mindfulness. They'll talk about how it can help the employee, but unless the business is aware of what that's fundamentally going to do to, without being too blunt about it, the bottom line, they're probably not going to pick up on the need. I also think a big element that people don't do enough of is boasting and bragging about what they know. And I think you have got to be willing to put yourself out there and get visible and talk a lot about your subject, because at the end of the day, people, whether it's corporate or not, people won't buy from you if they don't perceive you to be the expert. And I think self-doubt gets in the way a lot of the time of people getting onto the likes of LinkedIn or jumping on a podcast as a guest and actually talking about what they do from a place of authority. So unless you do that, no company is going to necessarily trust that you know your stuff. And I guess the third thing that I think people get wrong is they don't talk enough about their own story. They don't differentiate themselves enough, especially if they're, say, perhaps doing leadership training or something like that, which is quite generic. It often comes from a place of leadership theory, when in actual fact, I think what people buy into is the person and the stories that go with that. So the lived experience, the professional experience, the personal experiences, the values that somebody has, all of this comes into developing your own story. And if you can get that story across along with your authority, so maybe it is your credentials, maybe it is your social proof, maybe it is your, the qualifications and the research that you've done, but it has to come alongside your personal story, because I think for me, my experience has been people buy, corporates as well, buy into people. We tend to think of corporate as an entity, but behind every corporate there's a person. Normally an HR manager or a well-being lead is a real person who will be still buying with emotion, even though they might justify it with business logic. They're still going to be buying on emotion. So if you're not getting your personality and your story across, you're kind of not setting yourself up for success, I think. So they would be my kind of three things. Make sure your messaging is getting to the right people, share your story, and be willing to get visible.
Yeah, brilliant. Great top tips there, Bev. And also, I was going back to the first one with regards to selling your service as opposed to solving the pain or the problem. But if you just say, well, I do menopause training, then Okay, so what? What does that actually, what does the training, what's the outcome? And if that means that you are going to get more engaged staff, less likely they're going to leave, then you turn on the, it's going to save me money in the long term, or it saves me time, or because ultimately that's what we buy. We want to, in most cases, we're buying something that saves us time or makes us money, and solves a problem. And just selling yourself as a trainer of a something like menopause isn't really talking about the pain or the problem, is it?
Nobody needs training, really. No. Nobody buys training. People buy the outcome of the training, and if you're selling training, you're missing the point.
Yeah, I've heard it mentioned that training without coaching is more entertainment than actually. You're going to get more likely that you're going to turn up for the training, but actually whether you're going to implement it, that's where coaching and mentoring comes in. And I'm guessing that you do still do some training, and also the coaching and mentoring actually then follows on to make sure those things are being actioned.
I didn't do a huge amount of coaching and mentoring. A lot of what I did was more transactional, which was also part of the reason I think that I moved away into more of the coaching side of things, working with individuals, because unfortunately I think there is a tendency with corporate to put on a training and think that's job done, but they don't necessarily invest in the longer term behavioural change that needs to happen. Yeah. Training is great. It gives you knowledge, it gives you understanding, it raises awareness, but it doesn't necessarily alter attitudes or behaviour. And I think that's where sometimes that coaching and mentoring, maybe longer term programs, really come into their own. I think the subject that I was delivering was a bit transactional, and I do think there was an element of luck as well. I happened to start my business at a time when people were starting to open up more about menopause, so there was an element of luck there. But I do, a lot of it was down to just being very, very clear in my messaging. My LinkedIn profile, I think another tip, I guess, is make sure that your LinkedIn profile is absolutely crystal clear about what you do. Don't be vague, don't be ambiguous and don't try to be everything on your LinkedIn profile just because you can't teach everything. Be more niche, I guess, than that, and really focus on what you're going to be as an expert. You want to be a heart surgeon, not a GP. If you want people to buy your services, I think you've got to be more specialised. Specialised.
Yes.